I'm Clara, 31, and I work behind the scenes in a bridal boutique. When my sister asked me to attend her wedding, I thought, maybe this time I'd feel included. But nothing had changed, not even a glance my way. She raised a toast, then mocked the dress I wore, the one I made by hand. And then someone else spoke, and everything began to shift. The lights from the tent shimmered over the lake, reflecting off the water like soft glass. From the hill where I parked, I could already hear laughter, clinking glasses, and the kind of curated background music that always plays at events meant to impress. I adjusted the hem of my dress, a soft blue piece I'd sewn myself over 2 long weekends working late into the night after finishing my shifts at the gallery. It wasn't that I wasn't invited. Technically I was. Rebecca had texted me the day before pre-wedding dinner. 7 p.m. Formal. Don't be late if you're coming. If. I walked down the gravel path toward the marquee, each step sinking slightly in the damp grass. People were already milling around under the fairy lights, women in long dresses, men in sharp suits. Waiters floated past with trays of champagne. No one looked my way when I entered. My mother didn't. She was at the far end of the tent talking to a group of women from the country club, laughing in the polished way she always did when she wanted something. I hovered near the entrance for a beat too long, unsure where to go, then headed toward the seating chart displayed near the bar. My name wasn't on it. A waiter walked by. Looking for someone, he asked politely. No, I said, offering a small smile, just soaking it in. He nodded and moved on. I stayed near the perimeter, pretending to admire the floral arrangements. White roses, hydrangeas, eucalyptus, all cold, expensive, elegant. Very Rebecca. She made her entrance 15 minutes later in a custom off-shoulder ivory gown, her hair styled in soft waves, makeup flawless. She swept into the space like she owned it, and maybe she did. Applause broke out as she raised a hand, beaming. Beside her was our mother in navy, her arm looped tightly through Rebecca's. I watched from the corner, not that they saw. That was the thing, I was always just outside the frame. A few people approached me. Polite small talk, then polite exits. I smiled, nodded, said the right things. Dinner was announced. Everyone began moving toward their assigned tables. I waited until the rush died down, hoping maybe there was a card for me somewhere tucked into the edge of some table. But no. So I sat at a corner bench near the drinks table. Not a real seat, but I made it work. I held my glass with both hands to keep them steady. From across the space, Rebecca caught my eye. She didn't smile, just turned to say something to our mother, who glanced over and looked away. It shouldn't have hurt. I told myself that anyway. But then came the welcome toast. Rebecca stood, glass raised, all grace and confidence. Thank you all for being here, she began, her voice light and warm. I'm so lucky to be surrounded by such amazing people, friends, mentors, family who've supported me through everything. She glanced around. Her eyes swept past me like I was part of the decor. And to those who've inspired me by showing me exactly what I didn't want to become. She paused, smiling tightly. A few guests chuckled, not quite sure what they were laughing at. I stayed still. I knew that smile. I'd seen it growing up every time she won and needed me to know I'd lost. A fork dropped somewhere, followed by a brief hush. Then the clinking resumed. I took a sip of my champagne. The bubbles tasted like static. I shifted slightly on the bench, the corner digging into my back, and tried to blend into the shadows cast by the hanging lanterns. My dress, the one I had spent hours perfecting, suddenly felt too simple. Not because it lacked beauty, but because no one seemed to see it. Or me. A couple of guests brushed past, laughing about some inside joke from the rehearsal earlier that day. I hadn't been invited to that either. A woman in a red gown passed me, paused, and tilted her head. Oh, are you part of the catering staff? I blinked. No. Oh, sorry, I just thought. She smiled awkwardly and quickly walked off before finishing the sentence. Behind me, the main table was bustling. Rebecca was now seated between our mother and her fiancé Nathan. Their laughter came in easy bursts, practiced and smooth. I watched Judith, our mother, lean toward Nathan, speaking in hushed tones that made him chuckle and shake his head. Then someone tapped a spoon to their glass. A signal. Toasts were about to begin. A microphone was passed to Judith first. She stood gracefully, adjusted the brooch on her collar, and looked around like she was scanning a crowd of admirers. I just want to say how proud I am of my daughter. Rebecca has always been the shining light in our family. Brilliant, focused, never settling for less than excellence. She paused, and she found someone just as exceptional. Nathan, we're lucky to have you. A round of applause. I stayed still. Judith hadn't even looked in my direction once. She continued, and of course every star needs contrast. Every diamond needs a backdrop, so thank you to those who showed Rebecca how far she could rise. A murmur swept through the room. Some guests laughed quietly, unsure. Nathan glanced at her but said nothing. My hands tightened around the stem of my glass. I didn't move, didn't blink. They'd made the toast. Not just about Rebecca's success, but about my failure. The air felt thicker. My dress clung to me, not because of heat, but from the invisible weight of every glance, every assumption. I excused myself, though no one noticed, walked slowly along the edge of the tent and stepped outside toward the lake. The breeze was gentler there, cool against my face. I let it wash over me. Behind me, laughter rose again, not cruel, just careless. The kind that floats easily when no one in the room expects there'll ever be the punchline. I looked down at the hem of my dress, the tiny stitches along the lining. I had sewn them in silence with care. I hadn't made it to impress anyone. I'd made it because I wanted to wear something that felt like me, and yet I wasn't sure if anyone had actually seen it. A familiar voice called out behind me, not toward me but near enough. She made that herself, you know. I turned slightly. 2 older women were talking near the bar, one of them gesturing subtly toward me. She's the sister, right? What's her name again? Hannah, I think. Quiet one. Shame, the first woman said. She could be lovely if she tried harder. If she tried harder. I smiled at the phrasing. It had followed me all my life. I walked back in, not to join the party, just to be seen. I passed by Rebecca's table where she was now showing off her ring to a group of guests. She glanced up as I walked by. Her eyes skimmed over me, resting briefly on my dress. Then she smirked. "Did you thrift?" that she asked, voice loud enough for her side of the table to hear. A few chuckles followed. Someone whispered, "It's kind of vintage cute, though." Rebecca added, "Well, if you're going for humble chic, you nailed it." I stopped for just a moment. Not long enough to start a scene, just long enough to let the silence hang. Then I smiled softly. "No," I said. I made it. And walked away before she could respond. The air behind me stayed still, no more laughter. I didn't go far, just enough to be out of view from the main crowd. The garden behind the tent was lit with fairy lights winding around the trees like soft gold. I leaned against the trunk of an old oak, hidden in half-shadow, my fingers brushing the textured bark. From here I could still hear the murmur of the reception, the clinking of glasses, the rise and fall of voices. But it all felt distant, like a play I wasn't cast in. Someone walked by without seeing me. A man in a dark suit holding 2 plates of cake. He looked lost for a second, then turned and rejoined the crowd. For a moment I thought about leaving. Just disappearing before the dancing started. No one would notice. No one would ask. But then I remembered what the woman said earlier. She could be lovely if she tried harder. As if my worth depended on how I performed for them. I stepped back into the light. Not for their approval, but because I refused to vanish on their terms. Inside, the music had changed slower now. A few couples danced while others hovered near the dessert table. I moved quietly, skimming the edge of the dance floor. My dress whispered softly as I walked. No one turned. I spotted Elijah Monroe across the room, deep in conversation with one of Rebecca's fashion industry friends. He stood tall, elegant, the kind of presence that made people lean in when he spoke. His eyes drifted in my direction just briefly, but then returned to his conversation. I didn't interrupt. I didn't need to. A waiter offered me a drink. I took a glass, nodded politely, and drifted to the corner by the fireplace. From here, I could see everything: the people, the shifting circles of laughter, the way attention clung to Rebecca like perfume. Then Judith approached her again, whispering something close to her ear. They both turned in my direction, not to smile, just to confirm I was still there, still small. Rebecca raised her glass and made her way toward the center of the room again, everyone she called tapping her ring against the glass. Before the dancing begins, I have a little something to say. People turned. Quiet fell quickly, not out of respect, but out of expectation. Rebecca was always a performer. She smiled wide. I just wanted to thank everyone who made this night so special, and especially... Her gaze swept the room, landing on me for a moment, those who remind us where we came from. There was a pause, a perfectly placed pause. Some of us, she continued, chose different paths. And that's okay. Not everyone is meant for the spotlight. A few chuckles. Someone coughed. Rebecca held up her glass again. To finding your place, even if it's in the background. I didn't flinch. I didn't move. But Elijah Monroe turned slowly and looked at me. The room shifted just slightly, enough to feel it. The next hour passed in fragments. I moved like a ghost through the evening present, but never quite in focus. Conversations broke around me like waves around a stone. My name was never called, not even by Judith. Dinner began, long tables stretched beneath the canopy, lit by strings of warm lights overhead. Place cards shimmered at every seat. I found mine last tucked at the far end of the second table, right next to the speakers, loud, distant, facing no one. Rebecca's card, of course, was centered at the head table, flanked by her husband-to-be and the more photogenic side of the family. Judith beamed at them as if she were the one getting married. I didn't touch my salad. Not because I wasn't hungry, but because no one asked if I'd gotten a plate. When the main course arrived, the servers skipped my section entirely. I saw one hesitate, glance back at the kitchen, then disappear again. No one noticed. Or maybe they did and chose not to speak. To fill the silence, I took out my phone and scrolled through meaningless notifications. A text from a coworker, a shipping update, an app asking if I wanted a new photo memory. I turned the screen over. From across the table, Aunt Marlene leaned toward her husband. Is that the dress she made herself? She always did think she could sew. He murmured, not even bothering to lower his voice. It's brave. Marlene said, then added, though not in the way she thinks. I felt the words slide under my skin, sharp but strangely familiar. I didn't look up. I cut a piece of bread and chewed it slowly. I remembered stitching the hem of this dress 3 nights ago alone in my apartment, with soft music playing and the light from the hallway spilling in through the half-closed door. It was pale blue, the kind of shade I thought would disappear nicely in a crowd. Rebecca had once said I looked best in gray. A lull fell over the tables as Rebecca stood again this time, not for a toast but for a photo. Group shot, she called cheerfully. Close family only. There was a pause, the kind where no one quite knows who qualifies. Judith waved. Come on, all of us, except Hannah. She hates pictures. That wasn't true, I just wasn't asked anymore. A few people laughed as if it were a harmless joke. Rebecca added, besides, she's the artistic type, always prefers being behind the camera. I stayed seated, smiled faintly, picked up my glass to avoid eye contact. A flash went off, then another. The sounds of shifting chairs and light laughter filled the space where my name should have been. When the pictures ended, I stood to stretch my legs. No one called me back. I wandered past the dessert table untouched. The cake stood tall, 3 tiers of ivory and gold with delicate sugar flowers cascading down one side. I admired the craftsmanship, not the occasion. Elijah Monroe's still here? Someone whispered nearby. He's staying late. He said he was impressed with the detailing on Rebecca's gown. Another voice chimed in. I didn't mean to linger near the edge of their conversation, but I caught the way they spoke of him, as if his opinion added weight to the entire evening. I glanced toward him. He was alone now, near the bar, sipping something dark in a low glass. Our eyes met, briefly. Then Rebecca's voice rang out again, sharper this time. Who rearranged the place settings? Elijah was supposed to sit next to me. Someone shuffled. A server apologized. He doesn't need to be near the buffet, Rebecca added. That's not his level. I watched her, calm, precise. Every word calculated for control. and then her gaze caught mine again. This time she didn't smile, just tilted her head slightly as if daring me to react. I didn't. I turned and walked back toward my seat, and that not reacting felt louder than anything I could have said. I didn't expect to be called up during the speeches, but I didn't expect what came instead either. Judith clinked her glass, standing beside the head table. Before dessert, I'd like to say a few words about my daughters. Her voice was sugar-dipped, the kind you use when pretending to be gracious. Rebecca, of course, is everything I ever hoped for in a daughter poised successful, a leader in every room. Scattered applause followed. Rebecca beamed, hand gently placed over her heart, and Hannah Judith continued, eyes scanning the second table as if searching for me. Well, she's always marched to her own beat. Artistic, quiet, independent. She paused, and in that pause I heard more than words. I heard judgment disguised as praise, the kind that implies you were too strange to fit in, too soft to be celebrated. She even made her own dress tonight, Judith said with a light laugh. Isn't that adorable? More laughter, some polite, some not. I didn't smile. I simply set my fork down carefully so it didn't make a sound. She used to play fashion designer with pillowcases, Judith went on. Always told us she'd be on the runway someday. Someone added, she still could if she stitched a little faster. The room chuckled again. I didn't blink. I just listened. I'd gotten used to this rhythm build-up. Rebecca softened the fall for me with veiled jokes. I'm just proud both my daughters are here tonight, Judith concluded, raising her glass, even if one's always been more visible than the other. That line lingered. Rebecca smiled, then leaned toward the mic. I have to say something, she began. I've waited years for this day, not just to marry the love of my life, but to finally wear a dress made by someone who knows what looks good. She turned toward me. Not everyone gets it right their first time, huh, Hannah? There were a few gasps, but mostly awkward chuckles. No one stopped her. No one told her it wasn't funny. I met her eyes briefly, not in challenge, but in clarity. Then I looked away. Elijah Monroe, seated now somewhere near the middle table, hadn't laughed. I noticed that. He'd stopped sipping his drink. His hands were folded. The toasts went on. Friends from college stood, groomsmen joked, everyone tried to one-up the last with something sentimental or sarcastic. But my name wasn't mentioned again. After dessert, I stepped outside for air. The evening had shifted cooler, and the breeze coming off the lake was crisp against my skin. I walked the edge of the patio, shoes silent on the stone. Inside, the lights glowed golden. Laughter echoed out through the open doors. A couple passed me, strangers mid-conversation. Did you see the girl at the end of the table? The woman said. I think she's the sister, the one in the homemade dress. She's pretty, in a quiet way, the man replied. Doesn't seem like she wants the spotlight. Or maybe she was never given it. I didn't turn. I didn't speak. Just then, the music changed, upbeat, now pulling people toward the dance floor. Judith was already swaying with someone. Rebecca was in the center, arms raised, champagne in hand. I went back inside slowly. No one saw me return, or maybe they did, and once again chose not to. The dance floor glowed under 1,000 tiny lights. The DJ called for the family to join in. Judith waved toward the crowd. Come on, everyone but Hannah. She hates dancing too. My stomach didn't tighten. My heart didn't race. I just stood there watching the way no one questioned that. And then I saw Elijah, not dancing, not speaking, just standing near the edge. Watching too. Our eyes met again. This time I held the gaze a little longer. Then quietly I turned back toward the cake table and let the music carry on behind me like I was never part of it to begin with. The next hour blurred into a strange blend of laughter and choreography. Rebecca's friends led rehearsed dance routines, a slideshow played with photos of her childhood, not ours, just hers, and everyone clapped at her every move. I returned to my table like a shadow reclaiming its spot. At one point, a waiter brought around champagne. He skipped my table. I raised 2 fingers gently, a small gesture. He nodded but didn't return. When I looked up, Elijah had moved closer, still not dancing, still observing, and then came the bouquet toss. Rebecca stood on the small platform set up near the dance floor, bouquet in hand, eyes gleaming. Ladies, you know the drill, she called out, laughing. But someone please catch it who actually wants to get married. Everyone gathered behind her cousins, co-workers, friends. Judith nudged me. Go on. It's just a silly tradition. I took a step. Just one. That dress might trip her, someone murmured loud enough to be heard. Or it might finally get her noticed, another added laughing. I stopped, smiled faintly, then walked away from the circle before Rebecca even threw it. The bouquet landed somewhere in a crowd of giggles. Someone screamed victorious. I wasn't watching. Instead, I stood by the dessert table, fingers gently grazing the edge of a plate, as if grounding myself. I didn't feel out of place. I felt placed. Deliberately so. Later, when the dance floor emptied out a bit, Rebecca approached me with a glass of rosé. Well, she said, handing it over. You made it through the night. I accepted the glass. Almost. She looked me over, eyes stopping at the stitching on my waist. It's sweet what you tried to do, but next time, let me help. Some bodies need a little more guidance. There was no malice in her voice. That was the worst part. It was kindness coated in superiority. I'll keep that in mind, I replied softly. Rebecca glanced over her shoulder. Anyway, I should mingle. Thanks for being here. She didn't wait for a reply. I watched her go. And in that moment, I felt something shift, not in them but in me. Not anger, not pain. Clarity. I moved toward the far end of the reception area where the lake shimmered under string lights. A few people stood in quiet conversation. Elijah was among them. He noticed me approaching and excused himself. You've been quiet, he said, voice low, warm. It's loud enough without me, I replied. He chuckled softly. That's true. There was a pause. Then I saw your dress earlier, he said. I knew I recognized the pleating. Hand-sewn, I nodded. Every stitch. His gaze softened. It's stunning. But more than that, it's you. Completely. I didn't answer. I didn't know how to. Elijah tilted his head as if considering something unspoken. She doesn't see it, he said quietly. But the room will. Soon enough. Then he returned to the group. I stayed there for a moment, glass in hand, heart steady. The music swelled again behind me. Someone called out for a group photo. Family, only a voice shouted. I didn't move. The camera flashed. Laughter rose, but I just kept standing where I was between the lake and the lights, as if I'd never needed that frame to define me. The air shifted just after dessert. You could feel it like something waiting behind a curtain ready to be pulled open. The chatter grew thinner, glasses half full. People had begun to gather near the dance floor again, this time for speeches. Judith stood first. Her voice rang steady, proud. To my beautiful daughter, Rebecca, always composed, always radiant, you've made us so proud. Applause. Then came Rebecca's father-in-law, then her best friend. Their words like wrapping paper, glossy, smooth, forgettable. Then Rebecca stepped forward. The mic in her hand gleamed under the overhead lights. She didn't need a cue card. Of course she didn't. I want to thank everyone for coming tonight, she began, smiling broadly. It means the world to share this moment with the people who've supported me through everything. A pause. I especially want to thank my mom, who taught me what elegance really looks like. And my sister, she turned toward me. My name wasn't said. Who bravely chose to make her own dress tonight. I admire that kind of creativity. It takes courage. Especially when you know fashion isn't exactly your calling. Laughter. Controlled, polite, the kind that cuts deep because it's not loud. It's restrained, socially sanctioned. I didn't flinch. I didn't smile either. Rebecca held the mic loosely, but that's the thing about weddings, they bring out everyone's effort. Another laugh. I saw Judith's lips curve just slightly. Approval, not surprise. And then a voice from the side. Excuse me, Elijah said, rising from his seat. Everyone turned. He didn't rush. He simply walked to the front, stopping just beside Rebecca. He didn't take the mic. He didn't need it. I wasn't planning to speak. He began, his tone smooth, but waited. But sometimes silence would make me complicit. Rebecca's smile stiffened. I've had the privilege, he continued, turning toward the crowd, of seeing many designs on runways and ateliers at gala presentations. But tonight I saw something rarer. He turned slightly toward me. I saw authenticity, precision, handcraft with intention. The room held its breath. Miss Hannah's dress, yes, the one you just referenced, is stitched in a bias pleat technique that hasn't been mastered by many designers under 40. It takes hours, sometimes days. It's not store-bought, it's not mass-produced. Whispers rippled, eyes turned. He faced Rebecca again. Mocking that isn't bold, it's insecure. Rebecca blinked, and then Elijah did something small, so small, but it cracked the room open. He leaned in and whispered to her. Just a sentence. No one heard the words, but the impact was immediate. Rebecca's posture faltered for a breath. Her hand still holding the mic dropped slightly. Her eyes, scanning the crowd, darted to Judith and then away quickly. Then she walked off stage. No music played, no one clapped. I sat there, glass untouched heart still, and for the first time that evening no one was looking at Rebecca. For a long moment the only sound was the soft clinking of someone setting down their fork too carefully, as if afraid even noise would be inappropriate. No one followed Rebecca off stage. The spotlight stayed where it was on the empty mic stand. Then slowly people turned toward me. Some out of curiosity, some out of guilt. Judith didn't look. She was still facing her wine glass, swirling it gently, eyes unreadable, but her grip had tightened. Her knuckles were pale. A younger cousin, Rebecca's favorite, leaned toward another guest and whispered too loudly, "Who is Elijah again?" The woman replied, "That's Elijah Monroe. He designs for the Met Gala." Another pause. Then he just praised her dress. Their eyes moved to me. I didn't move, just gently folded my napkin on my lap. Then Elijah came closer quietly and extended a hand. "Hannah," he said, "I believe someone like you doesn't need introductions, just time." He didn't say more, but the gesture, him standing beside me, made more noise than any speech could. I rose, not quickly, not dramatically, just enough to nod politely, and in doing so I noticed it. Judith's eyes finally lifted, met mine, not with warmth, but not with dismissal either, with recognition, that kind that says, "Oh, you're not who I thought you were." Rebecca didn't return. Her absence said enough. A few guests murmured about the rest of the evening, whether there'd still be the father-daughter dance, whether things were okay, but they didn't ask me. No one asked me anything. They just kept watching. Dinner resumed, though slower. Laughter was stilted now, conversations unsure. It wasn't awkward, it was weighty, like people were rearranging assumptions in real time. I stepped outside briefly. The night was cool, the lake still just beyond the hill. A faint breeze lifted the hem of my dress, the same one Rebecca mocked, and I ran my fingers along one pleat. The stitching held perfectly even. I had made it 3 weeks ago between shifts after long nights. I never planned to be seen. Not like that. And yet somehow it was more honest than anything I could have planned. When I returned inside, someone had moved my seat closer to the center. No one said who. No one claimed it. But it was there. And I sat. Not because I needed their invitation, but because I didn't need to ask anymore. The rest of the evening unfolded in half-conversations and careful glances. It was as though no one knew what to do with the space I now occupied, no longer the shadow at the edge of the family, but not the spotlight either, just undeniable. I didn't insert myself. I didn't need to. People came to me slowly at first. A cousin asked where I got my dress, her voice measured as if testing the ground beneath her. "I made it," I said simply. She blinked, then looked again, really looked. "Oh," she said, and didn't say more, but didn't need to. That "oh" carried more weight than the dozens of compliments Rebecca had soaked in all night. Even Uncle Dave, always too loud, too opinionated, came over holding a glass of wine he clearly didn't need. "You always were the quiet one," he said, staring into his drink. "Didn't mean we didn't notice?" I didn't reply, just gave him a soft smile. His eyes flicked to my dress, then back up. "You look like you belong here." I tilted my head slightly. I always did. That quiet confirmation seemed to settle something in him. He gave a slow nod and drifted away. Judith never said anything directly, but she stayed close, orbiting never far. At one point, when the cake was being cut and guests had shifted to another tent for dancing, I passed her by the refreshment table. She didn't look at me, but she did speak. I didn't know Elijah would be here. Her voice was calm, but beneath it something brittle. I paused. Neither did I. She hesitated, then added, "Rebecca's been under pressure, planning this whole thing." I didn't respond, because I didn't need to defend her or condemn her. That wasn't mine to carry. Judith turned, then finally facing me fully. "You always kept your head down," she said. "Maybe that's why I—" She trailed off. I didn't finish the sentence for her. Some truths aren't owed, especially when they come too late. Instead, I adjusted the strap on my clutch and said gently, "I'm glad you noticed now." She nodded once, just barely, and that was the only apology I ever got. But it was enough. As the night drew on, people danced, laughed, but it all felt slightly off-tempo now, like the rhythm had shifted. I stood outside again before I left, looking toward the water. Elijah came to stand beside me, hands in his pockets. "I hope you don't mind," he said, nodding back toward the room. "That I said something." I shook my head. "You didn't have to. I know. That's why it mattered." We stood in silence for a moment. Then he said, "People forget how loud quiet can be." I smiled at that. Then I turned to go. As I walked toward the parking lot, my heels soft on the gravel, the music behind me faded. No one called after me, no dramatic exit, just the weight of a night rewritten. And as I reached my car, I looked back once, not at the people, but at the house. And I whispered just to myself, "They saw me." Then I got in, closed the door gently, and drove away. Some stories don't end with applause. They end in the hush that follows when people finally see what they chose to overlook. And sometimes that's the loudest sound in the room.